Dr. Carter, let's talk a little bit of nuts and bolts. So we're looking to welcome in people of all abilities, specifically with an eye towards those with disabilities. How do churches do this well, without sounding prescriptive, because each case is so unique? What are some examples that you've seen where this has worked well and people have felt welcomed and included and honored in their church context?
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your affirmation that this isn't recipe work. Every church is different in its culture and history and composition and priorities and on and on and on. So um, this is going to look different from one congregation to the next. But there's certainly postures that we have, sort of the way we orient ourselves to this work, our willingness to be flexible, to bend expectations, to rethink things if it brings one more person in. So there's a posture component, and then of course a practice component in terms of what are we specifically doing to think about um, things that might stand in the way of participation related to architecture, or physical spaces, to communication of how information is shared to individuals who might need to encounter that differently because of sight or sound or cognitive abilities. To think about how you know uh, um, how we think about our curriculum or the activities that we do in ways that adopt more of a flexible kind of what we call universal design approach, where we're not designing something and figuring out how do we fit someone with a physical disability or an intellectual disability into that, but we're designing activities at the outset that can include everyone. So there's these components there too of the practices. And then another element, if I guess I'm going through these P's of postures, practices, is partnerships. Is there are places where we don't really know how to move forward, and so how do we find people in our congregation or community who might bring expertise to each of these areas to help us navigate it? So, but I think concretely, the churches that we see really getting this well kind of have a some actions they take, you might say. And one is that they are regularly reflecting on their practices, and that's a posture to recognize that our community is always changing as new people are coming, and is the way we gather and how we gather working for those youth who are already part of this congregation, uh, but also that it would work for those who've not yet arrived. So there's a reflection point, and a lot of congregations form small teams of individuals who bring the vantage point of a parent, of youth, of people with disabilities to that reflection. They also undertake a lot of just asking, of seeking out the perspectives and preferences of people with disabilities. So talking with the youth in their program, talking with youth who aren't in their program, talking with other advocates, self-advocates, and others in their midst about what it would really look like to do this well. And then I think there's also an element of researching in this. So, how are other churches figuring this out? What are the things they've learned about how to do this well? You can gain a lot from other churches that are a little further along the way, but also there's an opportunity to reach out to those organizations again in your midst, the autism societies and Down syndrome associations and centers for independent living that actually this is what they love to do, is help people figure out how to be more welcoming. And then usually churches that have done that reflection have invited perspectives of people with disabilities and their families, sought out expertise, including maybe special educators in their congregation, and OTs or occupational therapists and physical therapists, people who know this but have not been invited to share their perspective on youth programming. Then they begin to do the equipping piece of this. So how do we make sure our volunteers and our youth ministry leaders who might be uncertain about how to move in this space are getting access to some training and information and guidance on this? And of course, all of that, just bathing that in prayer so that people are really seeking out guidance and direction and course correcting when wrong, and being willing to be courageous and vulnerable to step in spaces that might be hard and require you to do something different, or spaces that you might mess up and get very wrong. So I think that's an element of this vulnerability, and being willing to In fact, I think this is just kind of a churches that get it are willing to say, we know this is going to be hard space, but
Yep.
we know we're called to do it. And there's a just a posture of flexibility there, and vulnerability, where they're willing to try things, knowing that they might not shine at it, but knowing that it might open doors for someone who has so long been excluded.